Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Niclas Huschenbeth and I'm playing the St. Pauli Open right now. It was the third round today. Actually, we had 2 rounds today. Almost American standards here. The second and the third round. In the third round I played against FIDE master Lukas Winterberg and it was quite an exciting game, so I thought I would analyze it and share with you. So I was playing with the black pieces, so let's switch this board around. And my opponent started with d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, c4, and here usually I play the Bogey Indian, right, with bishop b4, but there's some annoying lines. So I started with b6, and only after g3 I now kind of transpose in the Bogey Indian by playing bishop b4 check. And I also managed to confuse my opponent a little bit because usually players don't choose this move order, and now I play c5 and I've avoided some lines that white can play. For example, knight bd2 is not that strong here, or it's not that useful, because if white plays knight bd2 he wants to combine it with playing e4, but he doesn't want to play g3 and e4, so it doesn't make that much sense in this position. So c5, now bishop g2, bishop b7, we just keep the bishops as they are. Castle, castle, bishop takes, now he took on b4. That's definitely possible. Now we're actually transposing to a line from the Bogey Indian that I've also analyzed in my video series on Chess24 about the Bogey Indian. So I was still on familiar ground here. a3, that's the typical way to open the position a little bit, open the a file for the rook. B takes a3. On the other hand, I have repaired my pawn structure again. You see, I'm getting rid of my double pawn. So I'm not too unhappy about this development. Rook takes a3, and now I want to stop white from playing b4, so I play a5. This is also typical, and this square is always a nice square for the knight, and we'll see this knight coming there in just a moment. Knight bd2 I didn't know anymore. Knight c3 is the typical move here, and I think also more natural. The knight can go to b5 possibly, and maybe white is tiny bit better, but the position is absolutely playable for black and it's not so difficult to play. So I was slightly surprised by knight bd2. Now knight a6, still I'm following the same plan. Knight e5, exchange the bishops, and here I decided to go for d5. I thought it would make a lot of sense in this position. I could also play something like d6, knight d3, queen c7 and go for e5, but in many blitz games I had, it's always like white plays e3 and then what do I do? How do I continue with my play? However, after d5 it's kind of clear how I want to play, because I will end up with a passed pawn here, or rather let's say distant pawn on the queen side, and I want to just push these pawns forward. So now he played e3, which is a good move, protecting a pawn on d4, bring the queen to the perfect square on f3. Really, that's the perfect square for the queen, I think. Knight b4, queen f3, and here I had a little think. I was considering to take on c4 and maybe follow up with b5, but I wasn't too sure about it, because on the other hand it's also weakening my square on c5, so he could aim for something like this, and if I play a4 myself here, he could play b3, and I don't have a good follow-up here. I could repeat moves, but that's not what I wanted at this point. So that being said, he could also maybe play knight c6 in this position and then play rook a2. Well, anyway, so I was looking at other options here, and then I discovered this move knight d7, which I quite liked. The knight is well placed on e5 and my knight is not too well placed on f6, so I said, well, let's exchange these knights. And here he made an inaccuracy. He played knight d3, which is a desirable move to play because once again he wants to exchange my strong knight on b4, but it has a slight drawback as we will see in the game. So he could take on d7, but I would be quite happy with this position, still having my good knight on b4. The computer is actually giving c takes d5 as the best option, which is surprising to me because I thought white shouldn't double his pawns here on the e-file, but it turns out that after knight takes d5, white will have some play with his rooks, and this is completely okay for white. Maybe I should take back with the e-pawn at this point. I still like my position, especially knight on b4 is so nice. Protected, cannot be attacked or cannot be pushed away, and also protecting the pawn on d5. So let's see what happened. Knight d3, so I take, rook takes, now I take on c4, so it's all forced, and now I play b5, and the point is now that white has to play knight d6. If he goes anywhere else, let's say knight d2, there's this move knight e5, and the rook on d3 is unprotected and white is losing in exchange. So in order to prevent this from happening, white has to play knight d6, and here he would almost lose already after rook a6, because now if knight takes b5, same story, and queen f4, g5 is also not working. But he has to move knight b7, unfortunately, attacking the queen, and after I move my queen, let's say to b6, then he just plays rook c1, and he can save his knight and he's completely fine. Better even. So that doesn't work, but I can just play queen b6, protect my pawn and attack the knight. Now the knight moves, now we have reached the end of the sequence, and now I play b4. And I push my pawn forward, and also I make sure this rook doesn't come back into play. So the rook is kind of silly placed on d3. So the position is a little bit more comfortable for me at this point. Rook c1, now I played rook a c8. It's important to take this rook. If I take the other one, white could for example play knight c5, and there are always ideas with this rook hanging on a8. And this is why I'm saying this queen is really well placed on f3. It's not only aiming at the king side, but it's also always having an eye on this long diagonal. So I played rook a c8, now he played rook dd1. The position is uncomfortable for white, no question. Maybe he should take on c8 and then play b3 just to stop a4 from happening. But nevertheless, it's slightly better for me. So rook dd1, and now it's important that I play a4 at this one, because otherwise he would play b3 himself, and it's much more difficult to get these pawns rolling. So a4, now you play king g1 to be able to move his queen and not end up in a pin on the long diagonal. And I said, okay, well, if you play a useful move, I'm going to play a useful move as well. Play h6, make some space for my king, and also take any knight g5 ideas out of the position. Now you play queen h5, and I thought he has the idea to play knight c5 now, which is something I don't necessarily want to allow. And I played f5. I was not too sure about this move because on the other hand I'm also weakening my king position, but it is actually a really good move because after knight d2 now I can further restrict his options. I play queen b5. Queen b5 leads to a clear advantage for black, but even stronger was queen a6. Same idea, not allowing knight c4, but also having an additional eye on the a pawn, just pushing the pawn, supporting it on the a file. So that would have led to a huge advantage for me. But I really like my queen on b5 for some reason, I'm not quite sure. Just seemed more natural to have an eye on the 5th rank as well. He played queen f3. And here I played knight f6. I was also looking at b3 to threaten to enter with rook c2, but he has knight b1 unfortunately. And this is not something I would like to allow. And white is actually close to equality again. Another possibility is to play a3, but I was always not sure if I really want to do this. White can take, rook takes c1, b takes a3. Of course I have this dangerous passed pawn on the A file, but it's not that clear. So black is better, no doubt, but still not easy to convert this. So I played knight f6. This looked like a sensible move, taking control of these squares, but he pushed e4 anyway. And here I had another thing. I was again looking at b3, but didn't like it too much. Well, I can just take on f5, I take back, and again this move knight b1 seems to be just fine for white. So I didn't play this. And then I came across this move rook fd8, and I played it actually. And the point is to force white more or less to take on c8, so I gain control of the c file. So maybe rook takes c8 was a mistake. Now maybe he should play e takes f5. E takes f5 and queen e3. When it's not that clear, still I'm better of course. Also have this nice square on d5 for my piece. Maybe I can put my queen here. Looks really nice, but still white has some defensive resources, so it's not over. But he had seen this possibility to take on c8 and play d5, and actually I was quite annoyed with this move. I didn't really see it coming. I only looked at it very shortly beforehand, and I thought I could take on e4 and take on d5, but of course that's not possible because of knight d6, and I missed this fork in my calculations before. And then it turned out this move is really annoying. I was getting a little bit I was panicking a little bit. Well, not panicking, but I was annoyed with myself that I had missed this move. Because suddenly it turns out there's not an easy answer. With the computer it's always easier. Computer gives moves like queen a6 or queen d7, but these are not moves that are naturally coming to mind, right? Of course you calculate moves to take, but it doesn't work out quite well here. Knight takes e4, queen takes e4. Now I can't take on d5 because of queen e6, and it's always this rook on c8 which is unprotected and always hanging in all these variations. For example, another line I calculated was e takes d5. Now if queen takes f5, I think I'm fine. I can just play rook e8. I also have this option of playing queen e2. That's also a threat, but white can stronger play e5 first, and it's again really annoying. So, and then next move take on f5. So I was looking at other options, then I found a really strong move which I'm quite happy about, which is rook d8. Just play the rook back. And also now the rook is not hanging on c8 obviously anymore. So now he took on e6 and I took on e4, and it's all working out for me. So there's some important lines here. One is that after knight takes e4, I just take on d1, and the e-pawn is not dangerous enough. Knight takes e4, queen d8, king h7, e7. I simply play knight f6, cover the square twice, and of course I have my own passed pawn, so that's easily winning. Another important point is that e7 doesn't work, because I can just take on d2, and now white cannot take on d8 anymore and queen, but I just take on d2. If he takes back, well, I take his queen, and again I have this square covered well enough with two pieces. So he is forced to play queen e3. And here I made a mistake. I played queen h5, which looked really attractive, but it's not as good as it looks like. Rook d3 would have been a really good choice, and actually also looks really attractive just to hit the queen. I guess I just want to keep my rook on the 8th rank to have an eye on this pawn, but the knight is taking control of this pawn anyway, so I could just move my rook. And now queen f4, and I can already go for something like this, e3, queen c5, and this pin is also really annoying for white. This pawn will drop, and black is winning already actually. So yeah, I missed the chance here. And if the queen is going somewhere else, let's say to e2, I can just play queen d5, and he's just never getting out of this pin anymore. And e7, I just play king f7, so that's all fine. Or instead of rook d3, I could also play queen d5, also clear advantage for black, but not that clear. Not as clear as the other variation. So queen h5 looks really good, hitting the rook on d1, also having this threat knight g4 and queen takes h2. But if white plays queen e1 here, my task is anything but easy. But he played f3, which is a mistake. Queen e1 is defending the rook, of course, protecting the rook, and defending against this threat as well. And what I want to do, I want to play knight g4 anyway, and then h4 and e3, and I thought this looks really good. And here I just play queen e5, something along these lines. But I only noticed after I play queen h5 that white can play knight f1 now, because the rook is not hanging on d1 anymore. And this is really annoying because white has still this pawn on e6, so that could turn around really easily. So instead of playing knight g4, I would need to play something else here. Queen d5 would be possible, but here e7 might be annoying. And now I have to play rook e8, because if I play rook d7, there's knight takes e4, unfortunately, which is quite a pretty move. And I'm losing. Queen takes d1, knight takes f6, and white will queen. And well, so I have to play e7, rook e8, but it's not that clear anymore. White can now move his knight, and he definitely has good chances here to draw. But fortunately for me, my opponent played f3, and I just knew this move just cannot work here, because now the white king is really weak as well. E takes f3, now e7. If I move rook e8 now, white will just take on f3, so I play f2, give this check. Okay, of course, white cannot take with the queen because I take on d1 with check. So the question was king g2 or king takes f2, and actually king g2 would have been better than king takes f2. So let's have a quick look. King g2, I was looking at queen d5 here, but I probably would have spotted that white has knight e4, which is quite a strong reply. And now after queen takes d1, knight takes f6, g takes f6, white doesn't take the rook, but he just queens on e8, and it is a perpetual. And that's a draw. So queen d5 doesn't work, but I can simply play rook e8. Now the rook is still hanging on d1, so knight f3. But here it's really not easy. The computer gives a move like queen b5. That's really a difficult move to play. Point is also to having an eye on this one. Also maybe queen b7. Really not easy. And one possible variation would be here to play queen e6, king h7, knight h4, queen b7 check, and I collect this pawn, and I have defended against the white threats, and I'm winning here because I still have an extra pawn here. But definitely, also I wasn't too high on time, so that would have definitely made my task much more difficult. So king takes f2. Here I also had another thing. There are a lot of options. Queen takes h2 doesn't help me too much. I could play this, but I'd rather keep all these threats in the position. So I just played rook e8, which is actually the best move. Rook takes d2 unfortunately doesn't work, because after rook takes d2, knight g4 check, king g1. Now unfortunately white will get his own queen again, and I don't have anything here, so white is winning. Apart from rook e8, I also thought about rook d6 to take this queen e6 check out of the position, but it looked too superficial. I thought maybe white could play e8 queen, but he can also play moves like king e1. Still pretty unclear. And I saw this line which happened in the game, and I thought, let me get rid of this pawn on e7. That's my first goal in this position, and then I can see what happens. So rook e8. Now I have again all these threats, so white has to play queen e6 check. And here was another, maybe the last very important moment in the game, where to move the king. Well, I could also play queen f7 maybe, but no, probably I shouldn't do that. But where to move the king, I was really an important decision. I play king h8, and that's the right choice. If I play king h7, then white has this move suddenly, knight e4, because now he threatens to take with check, and also if I take on e4, he takes also back with check. So I saw this move, I was scared of this move, even though it's crazy with h2 hanging and knight g4 in the air, but it works. And I just want to show you the computer line here, knight g8. I didn't see this move, but it seems that white has some good chance here. Rook d7, and don't ask me why, I didn't go into too much detail, but only after a3 now white plays rook d8. I guess it has something to do with the endgame, maybe. Well, rook d8, now that's all forced here. Knight takes e7, now knight g5 is an insane move. Pawn has to take, queen needs to protect the rook on e8, so h takes g5, queen e4 check. I just want to go through this line, I think it's pretty cool. Queen takes e7 now, black exchanges queens, and we have this rook endgame, where I'm not entirely sure if it's winning for black. Black plays rook a8, white plays rook a2. Yeah, might very well be winning, but still some work ahead for black. Yeah, it should be winning. Okay. Anyway, so king h7 would have made my task much more difficult. So after king h7, I should say, would have made my task much more difficult. After king h8, now knight e4 doesn't work. Just take the rook on d1. So he has to play knight f3, defend against the threat of queen takes h2 as well as queen d1. But now I can just play queen c5, and this is what I had seen, and here I was very happy because I have eliminated this pawn. I'm a pawn up, and also his king is really weak, and my king is much safer. So I knew I should be winning here. He played queen a6, but here I still had to make a decision how to continue. There's nothing obvious in the position. I mean, I could think about moves like this, but I didn't want to do this with being low on time, opening my king up a little bit. I didn't like this too much, so I just played rook e8, and I'm quite happy with this move as well. It's a nice prophylactic move, taking control of the 8th rank, and now just preparing knight g4 on all these moves. And white really doesn't have much to do anyway, so that was quite possible. If he takes on a4, I can just play rook e2, and well, it's going to be over soon. So he played rook d2, preventing rook e2, but now I'm in time to play knight g4. And now he took on a4, but of course this cannot work for white. King f2, I just play rook f8, and there are just too many threats in the position. So it's not surprising this is losing for white. So knight c4 is the obvious threat. He played queen d7. If he plays rook e2, I can just play knight g4, king g2, and queen d5, and he has no sensible way to protect the pawn and the knight on f3. And well, yeah, what else is there? I mean, if he moves the rook away from the second rank, then I also just play knight g4, queen f2 is coming. We don't have to look at this anymore. So he played queen d7, a move I didn't see coming, but it wasn't too hard to figure out the refutation here. Simply knight c4, and that's it. And he resigned, because after queen d4, I can just take on d2, and I have this fork, win back the queen, and I'm up a rook. And after rook d4, I can just take on f3, and there's another fork on e5 coming. And if he moves his king, I don't even take on d2, I take instead again the full piece, because if a check is coming I just return to f8. So that's just over. Yeah, I'm really satisfied honestly with my game. There was one mistake or one inaccuracy, I would say queen h5, but apart from that I think my game was pretty solid, and this is why I decided to make a video analysis. So I'm on 3 out of 3 now. I won all my 3 games, but well, the tournament is still long, 6 more rounds to go. If you want to follow, I'm posting a report every day on Facebook, so have an eye on that. And then see you next time. Bye.